Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity, Stop the New World Order, welcome to Hapanlo TV, and well, we're back again. It's another Dreaming Sources recording, and this time, the subject of this particular one is a Neil Geddes award. Now Neil, of course, was invaluable to me for this event. In fact, the trailers, I mean, I did trailers on my channel, but Neil did trailers on his, which are far superior. I mean, he's far better with the editing and the video effects and things like that. He's producing his own series of recordings based on his own footage, which is absolutely fine with me. And so you can watch them too, along with this one. And on the technical side, they're an awful lot better. So all these things I couldn't have done without Neil. And indeed, getting Deborah in would not have been possible without Neil, because Deborah couldn't travel to the event, so she had to appear on Skype. But he, of course, is a speaker as well, so I've got to be doubly thankful to him. And his speech is, again, it's centred on the moon, and this is very, very telling considering what Marcus was talking about. And well, there's an awful lot to do with the moon. It's not just about whether astronauts have walked there or not, whether there's bases there and things like that. But the moon itself is an extremely peculiar object, considering, in terms of heavenly bodies, it's the one nearest to the Earth by far. In fact, it's 100 or more times closer than any other object in the celestial sphere, on the celestial world. So, you know, it's been studied very carefully by astronomers since ancient times, and of course by the space program, secret or otherwise. But it has its secrets, an awful lot of secrets, and well, Neil is going to talk about a few of those. So I hope you enjoy it. Okay, right. Well, it's been a long weekend. We have one more speaker for you. Don't go at the end when Neil's finished. Don't go at the end, because there's some more attractions coming up which you might be interested in, and I'll explain when Neil is finished. But we do have, this is our last speaker of the weekend. It's gone very quickly, hasn't it? Right, we heard lots this morning about the moon from Marcus Allen, and now we're going to hear a bit more. Marcus talked about some of the strange things on the moon, as well as the fact that people may or may not have been there to see them. But what if there was a base on the moon, or aliens on the moon? This is another conspiracy theory. It may or may not be tangential or cohesive with Marcus's, but we'll find out. So, give a big hand to Neil Geddes Ward.
Thank you for that rapturous applause. It saves me having to dub something on in the edit suite later on. Anyway, for those that don't know me, I'm Neil Geddes Ward. You perhaps see me around all weekend helping out on the technical side with Ben's conference here. Wonderful conference, great speakers. I also am an artist. It's an artwork of mine there at the front, if anyone's interested in taking a look. And I'm also a researcher into the paranormal. I run the High Wycombe Paranormal Meetup Group in High Wycombe. For anyone that's interested in coming along, we operate once a month, or we meet up once a month, usually on the last Wednesday of every month, from a pub called the Bricklayers Arms in Downley in High Wycombe. And you can find a few videos on YouTube, so if you just type in High Wycombe Paranormal Meetup Group on YouTube, you should find a few videos. And Ben has obviously done quite a few talks for us there as well. So yeah, it's actually with Ben's added input that the group has grown over the years with interesting speakers. So anyway, I shall press on. As you can see, I did this talk about 2 years ago, on Wednesday the 31st of August, about 2 years ago, at High Wycombe Paranormal Meetup Group called Aliens on the Moon. I've always been fascinated with the moon, ever since I was a young child, because obviously I've always been interested by space, Star Trek, Doctor Who, Star Wars, things like that. And obviously, you know, you want to see planets and things like they show in the films, but obviously the nearest celestial object in the sky that we can look at least, is the moon. So, as a child, I actually went out and got a telescope and started to study the moon. I don't know all the craters and things, I've got a fair idea of some of them, but I'm not an astronomer by any stretch of the imagination as well, I should point that out. But I've always had this fascination with the moon, I've always enjoyed looking at it. And then I started to hear strange things about, well, we've been to the moon, or have we been to the moon, they've landed this on the moon, or they put that around the moon. But then whispers started to come across saying, oh, well, they found this, and they found that, or they saw aliens, or they saw UFOs, and I thought, well, I'm going to look into this. So over the past few years, I've been compiling evidence, or looking at the evidence that's out there, the different claims that people say what's up there, apart from the craters and the mountains and things. Is there anything else happening up there? So I'm not conclusively saying there is aliens on the moon. I'm looking at the evidence and thinking, well, if there is aliens, what would they be doing there? Okay, so I'll press on and see how we go. Is that moving? No, I have to go this way, I think. It is. Okay, yeah. Now, that's just a blank screen at the moment, so I shall see if I can get that going. Yeah, this is NASA's version of the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter's scanning the moon, and it's the evolution of the moon, essentially, where they think the moon has come from. But this doesn't actually show the origins of the moon from whatever you may think it be. They show it as a molten rock floating through space, first of all. So it's looking very Star Trek-y. I mean, it's impressive animation and things like that, but they show it as a big molten hot blob of something floating in space, and then over the billions of years they show it getting bombarded by meteorites, objects in space, and obviously this is, they're saying how the craters were formed. So there you can see it's very, if anyone does Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, it's very much like that actually. It's quite impressive graphics and things. So it gives the basin formation, heavy bombardment, so many billions of years ago. You can hear the sound, which is interesting because there's no actual sound in space, but they obviously put it there for the effect. Now, this is what they're suggesting is what they call the dark patches on the moon, the mares as they call them. And when you look at through a telescope, or you can see the patterns on the moon, you can see the man on the moon, this is where the dark patterns are allegedly coming from. You can start seeing them form there, you see. Interestingly, the Chinese, we call it a man in the moon, the Chinese have a thing, they say it's a rabbit in the moon, and they sent a probe to the moon and it was called Jade Rabbit or something like that. Because they believe it's looking like a rabbit. I can't work that one out myself. So there are more bombardments of meteorites that then throw more craters at it. Quite a dangerous place to be, really, isn't it? Really? I wouldn't like to be on there when that's happening. Certainly a brolly wouldn't protect you, would it? Now, the thing is, you'd think that's all stopped. In fact, you know, the moon's presumably still getting bombarded by meteorites all the time because it has no atmosphere, we're told, to actually stop those kind of things burning up. Whereas the Earth is protected by the atmosphere, and as these meteorites hit Earth, the friction of the Earth, and you can see them, come through as shooting stars as they illuminate and burn up. But the moon doesn't have that kind of thing, so they create more of an impact. There's more of a history, you can see things that happen to it over the millions of years. So that's what NASA says the evolution of the moon is. There's also other theories that suggest that there's, they call it the double whack theory, where something hit the Earth, something broke off, and then something later on, a few more billion years later, maybe from Mars, whacked it again and broke off and then became the moon. They can't quite agree how the moon was put there. So I'm just going to go forward to the next slide. No, hang on, the next one. There's this book called Who Built the Moon by Christopher Knight and Alan Butler. And this is a very interesting book, worth reading if you want to find out more. They come up with some interesting research things about the moon. Things that are very strange coincidences. For instance, if I just get to the next page, the moon revolves exactly at 100th the speed that the Earth turns on its axis. The moon is exactly 400 times smaller than the sun, and is precisely 400 times closer to the Earth. This 400 keeps occurring. They also discovered that the moon possesses little or no heavy metals and also has no core. In fact, many specialists suspect the moon is hollow, and they've actually supposedly crashed craft on there, hollow or other kind of craft, that they measure the what do they call it, the ringing of it, if you like, and it rings like a bell, they say. It suggests that there's not actually an inner core to this thing, there's actually an empty chamber, if you like, inside it. And if our moon did not exist, nor would we, experts now agree that higher life that we have on Earth is only because the moon is exactly where it is in space. So that's an interesting thing. And even people like Carl Sagan, we mentioned earlier, and also Isaac Asimov, famous science fiction writer and author. He had a degree in science as well. He remarked about the moon shouldn't actually be there. It's almost an impossibility. The whole science of it doesn't really add up, and yet it's there in our sky today. Now here is the moon in a clearer thing. You can see what they call these mares, the patches, the dark patches that we saw getting bombarded earlier. Now I can't remember where the astronauts were sort of generally over this section, but there's all these different. They call it lava plateaus, where supposedly lava leaked out onto the moon and caused these large plains of areas. And this is mostly where they've landed craft and things like that. Now, when I was a child, I mentioned earlier I had a telescope because I was always fascinated. And one day, this would be about the mid-70s, it might have been 1976, but I can't precisely remember the year. I remember being in the playground at school, and it was one of the days where you can actually see the moon during the daylight to a certain extent. And I remember seeing this white object near the moon, pretty much for most of the day. I could see it during my lunchtime break at school. And so I thought, oh, that's a bit weird, a star next to the moon. What's a star doing next to the moon? Anyway, I came out at 4 o'clock and I could still see this star. I thought that hasn't moved or anything. So I ran home, got my telescope out and looked at it. And so what I've done here is a reproduction in Photoshop to kind of give you an idea of what I could see. From my memory, of course, because obviously I didn't have cameras or Photoshops back then to kind of record these things. And I saw this object, spherical white object, and to me it looked like a star. I'm not trying to claim it was a UFO or anything. It was just what appeared to be a star next to the moon. But the thing is, I've never seen it since. And that's a weird thing, that if you got a star, you'd think over a period of time and months it would repeat itself as the moon goes through its orbit and the Earth, and it would move through a certain portion of the sky. I've never seen it since, and that was like 40 odd years ago. So what the hell was that? I don't know, but it was there for most of the day in 1976, roughly, in the summer of 1976. Now, it could have been something that was orbiting the moon, it could have been something that was in our atmosphere. I just don't know what it was to this day, but I thought I'd just mention it. Some strange things going on. Now, I'm not obviously the only person to research the moon through my telescope, because I don't know as much as other people. There's some very clever people out there that have been looking into the moon for many, many years. And this is just some of the things, they call them lunar anomalies, okay? So you've got coloured fogs. People have actually cited what they believe to be coloured fogs through their telescopes, high-power telescopes looking at craters in the moon. They say powerful lighting perpendicular to the surface, removing the shades of the craters that can give the impression of a fog, hiding the relief, which is the edge of the crater, which is visible because of the shadows. And they talk about coloured areas of lights in craters. They talk about certain craters where they've fixed luminous points and things like that. We're going to have a look at some of the examples there. This is one that was cited in 1824. Okay, the appearance of multiple multicoloured points in the, if I can say, Aristarchus crater. So it looks like tiny little lights in this crater here. Now, what would be causing the glows? Now, this isn't actually a photo taken in 1824. This is a reproduction in Photoshop. Someone's got an image, I didn't do this. Someone's taken an image of that crater and they're trying to reproduce the description that was written down using modern technology to sort of visualise what it might have looked at. And so they put different coloured lights in there to sort of think that this is how this person sighted it. Okay? Now, in 1877, someone else saw a line of light appear in the Exodus crater for a period of 1 hour. Now, that almost, you can almost say, well, is that one of those, you know, tubular sort of UFOs or cigar-shaped UFOs that parks in there? I don't know. Again, strange, mysterious lights appearing in craters being sighted. And the same crater we saw earlier, someone else in 1954 has seen kind of glow, a bluey glow there. This is where we saw the lights earlier. So what is going on? That crater has cropped up a couple of times. And then again, in 1964, the very same crater has got the same glow with a bit of pink showing up there. So there's some strange activity in some of these craters. And you think, well, why would that be? If the moon's dead, there's no one there, there's no atmosphere, what's causing that? Okay? So, and then this is an interesting one. 7 white points which form the Greek letter gamma in the Littrow crater. We've heard about the Littrow area of the moon, which is supposedly Apollo 17's landing point back in 1972. Maybe if they really did go, maybe that was part of the interest of why they went to that particular area. They said they went there for geological reasons, but that's always a cover story, I think, if they did go there at all. So yeah, interested. What are these parts, or what are they in that crater? Are they UFOs, or are they just lights? Are they gases escaping from the moon? We're not quite sure. Now, the Brookings Report, some of you may be aware of that. The Brookings Institute advised the United States in 1959 the proposed studies on the implications of peaceful space activities for human affairs. In other words, prior to NASA really getting up and running, they wanted to kind of prepare a report of how would the public receive any information that was maybe slightly unsettling to the psyche of the American populace, or indeed the world, perhaps. So basically, they were worried that any sort of discoveries of alien activities or UFOs or anything like that, if they actually found it, NASA found them, that it could cause a slight panic, and that they actually pointed back towards the War of the Worlds broadcast, which traumatised America. And so they were advising basically the powers that be to keep things maybe under wraps a little bit, or don't release so much information, because they don't want to panic America or the world. Now, we saw this earlier in Marx's report, so I'll briefly go over it again. This is the, well, they call it the rolling rock coming out of a crater, which is interesting. And again, you can see it here, and it's causing the patterns. Now, as I mentioned to Marcus, we were chatting about this yesterday, the official explanation is, as I understand it, it's a moonquake that's caused these rocks to roll down the crater and up and out of it. And Marcus pointed out there was another rock that's up here somewhere. But we can't see other rocks that have rolled with it. You would assume that if all these rocks would be rolling together if there's a whole quake, particularly the fact that these are fairly large rocks, surely lighter rocks would have rolled with these ones. The fact is there only seem to be 2 rocks that have rolled through these craters, or rolled down hills and then up hills again. Now, I suppose if you have a certain momentum, you could roll some downhill, it will roll up a little bit. But yeah, it's a very strange one. Is it a rock, though? We don't know what it is, but it's something that's caused tracks in the moon there. Here's a closer up of it. Now, maybe some very clever people can work out, with the patterns of those tracks, they might be able to work out what shape. That's obviously causing a slightly deeper shape there and deeper shape there. So you can perhaps work out what shape that is by the patterns, impressions it's casting into the soil, the regolith, I think it's called. Now this is an interesting one, see if we can get this to play.
Okay, objects coming in up at the top.
This is a guy that films the moon regularly through his high-powered telescopes, and he claims to have caught various anomalies through his telescope. Now, I'll watch it first, and then I'll tell you certain things about it, or what I believe to be about it.
I'm not sure I'm doing this from memory, but I think the longest I've had a lunar object on screen is 15 seconds or less. As a matter of fact, maybe one of the boomerangs might be closer to 12 or 13 seconds. I'd have to go back through them. There are a couple that do a really long run. At any rate, when you watch this, and I'll give you better views of it here shortly, you can tell that it's not traveling in a completely straight direction. It's kind of got a zigzag look to it. And as I get a good zoom on it, we'll maybe better determine what's going on here. Of all the things I've shot, this one sure feels like it's close to the moon. And I'll address that in a second. Here we come at 500% speed. Now look at the motion. You can get a sense that there's a slight zigzag pattern, particularly at the bottom there. Part of it's the camera pan, but most of it's the optic. Here we come. We're zoomed 500%. The guy at the scope shop had calculated a while back for me that a single pixel at the lunar plane averaged about 1.5 miles. So this thing seems like it's got to be close to the moon just because of the speed it's traveling and how small it is. And if it's anywhere near the moon, it's a big dark object. Now here I've sharpened, and you can see that halo coming in around it. A lot of the objects I film near or in front of the moon kind of get this halo. A lot of them get a red hue, but I don't pick up a red hue on this one, but it's too small to really zoom in on anymore, or it'll just become pixelated. Now, if you watch as it gets down to the bottom and the zigzag gets really prominent, it almost looks like it's spinning. So I'm not sure if the mothership emptied its trash or whether this is some kind of an object scanning the moon. Here we are at 500% again, 500% speed and zoom, and that's to exaggerate the wobble. And here we come, 200% zoom, 500% speed, and I put the grid up so that you can get a sense of the back and forth movement. It's a little more than just spinning, making that motion. Anyhow, there it is. Pretty unique UFO at the moon.
Okay, that guy calls himself Crow777. He puts a lot of videos out. I did see one of his a few years ago where, again, he shows a craft in front of the moon with, looks like retro rockets firing as it's tumbling through space. Now that, I'm not suggesting that is in orbit around the moon. It could be, if it is an object, that it's just that the moon's providing a backdrop that you can actually see it. There could be loads of these objects flying around, but because it's in the darkness of space, you can't see it. But as soon as you put something illuminated in the background, you can suddenly see it. But it appears to be in front of the moon, or it may, you know, it may not be. I don't know. It may be orbiting the moon. But the thing about this guy, he's also filmed something called the lunar wave, and I've seen videos of that. Now, the guy does a lot of graphics on his YouTube channel, which suggests that he's got a certain ability of doing graphics. So you could argue, I suppose, that he could have created something like that in some graphics effects program to get a load of YouTube hits. He's got to keep feeding the machine with clever videos, okay? So I'm trying to see it from both sides. Yes, it could be a genuine object, but it could also theoretically be created in a program, okay? And I'll show you some examples of what can be done. Oh, hang on, get to the next one. Now, this is something, this is supposedly, if we did go to the moon, they've supposedly reported strange signs. Now, this could be a CIA kind of cover story, if you like. If we say that Neil Armstrong saw aliens on a crater on the moon, then obviously they must have definitely gone there, okay? So you've got to bear in mind that yes, if they did go to the moon, they may have seen aliens or UFOs on the moon, but it could be a backstory that kind of just feeds the Apollo idea that we did go to the moon, okay? So this is something I found on the internet, and I thought it was an interesting thing just to have a look at. Apollo 17.
Apollo 17 prepares to land. Astronaut Jack Schmitt sees something else on or near the lunar surface.
Is Jack going nutso? Is he actually seeing something on the surface?
One astronaut seeing something could be explained as a hallucination. Two strange sightings merits further investigation. Cernan and Schmidt's report baffles experts for decades. A photograph from the Apollo 17 archive could offer a clue to what Cernan saw.
This image was taken during a lunar excursion on Apollo 17. And in this image, you see a moonscape, but you see something else. Up here in the corner, there's a really odd 3-dot object. We don't know what it is.
There's this cluster of 3 bluish covered lights. They're too bright and too blue to be a planet or constellation.
Could that be what Cernan saw?
Apollo astronaut Alfred Worden has a theory for what the mysterious object could be. On a previous mission, he released a miniature spacecraft to orbit the moon.
Just before we start our way back home, I release a small subsatellite, and it goes out on a rail that twists it, and as it's twisting, long arms come out to stabilize it in its spin. It's in lunar orbit spinning, and the sun is reflecting off the arms, as they go around, and you can see the flashing of the arms. My assumption is that that's what Gene's seeing, but I do not know if ours is still there.
It's impossible to be certain about what Sermon saw. Some speculate that Schmidt's sighting could be caused by meteors hitting the moon. To date, there is no official NASA explanation for the Apollo 17 sightings.
Yeah, so, I mean, if they did go there, they're claiming that they've seen some strange things anyway. I mean, that could be a meteorite hitting the moon. As you see, the moon's bombarded by meteorites all the time, so it would be likely that if you were in orbit around the moon, you just kept looking out. Eventually, like in the same way that when you're on Earth, you're in the night sky, you're going to see shooting stars on a clear night. The logic would be that you'd see maybe flashes hitting the moon as more meteorites again. Right, let's get to the next one. Oh yeah, it's another interesting clip. I've got to remember what's in this one now. Oh yeah, I know what this is. This is interesting. Now, that is not a real base on the moon, okay? That's from a TV series, Space 1999. They shouldn't have put that bit there, but I've included it there just to show it. Again, people have done clever graphics and things like that. I think you've got this guy on your Facebook, Ben, I think.
Yeah,
I've seen his
Johnny.
name. Yeah. He's an English guy, apparently.
Yeah.
But this guy's got a high-powered telescope, and he's filming the moon. And take note of the shapes that you're going to see, because they crop up in someone else's video, okay? It's hard to tell. Now the shimmering effect is the atmosphere of the Earth. When you look at it close up, you see the heat rising from the Earth, and it causes this shimmering effect. You see some interesting shapes, like square shapes here, shapes there. I'm standing at the wrong angle to see it, actually. Slightly blurry, but some shapes that are not craters. If you can see that. Yeah, look at the shapes here. They look like old ruins or something. These parts poking out are very interesting. Remember that. Okay. Yeah, this is an English guy, so he's got an 8-inch telescope, which is the diameter of the mirror, I think it is. And basically he's pointing at the moon and videoing lots of things that he believes he's discovered up there. That's just one small example. And interesting, that shape that I saw at the end, it occurs in another kind of Fox TV special about aliens on the moon, which I found. So we'll see if we find that one again. Before we get to that, we'll talk about other people that have claimed to have seen things on the moon. Now this is Ingo Swann. Anyone heard of him? Yeah. Ooh, loads of people, so I won't go into too much history about him because you know about him anyway. But for those that don't, he was a remote viewer, if you like, an early psychic, if you like, in the CIA or whoever was running that sort of remote viewing program back in the 70s. And he was having to do remote viewing of like Russian bases and secret installations and things like that, and he'd kind of tune his mind and try and give coordinates, or he was given coordinates to look at, and he'd report back using his remote viewing psychic abilities of what he could see. But he was getting so bored out of his brain doing this thing that he said, I want to try something different. And so his boss said, well, what do you want to try? And he says, well, I don't know, let's try and see if I can remote view Jupiter. So he went and remote viewed Jupiter, and this would be in about the mid-70s, and he was reporting back strange things about Jupiter that no one knew about, and they sounded a bit controversial at the time. And he basically reported it all in this book called Penetration, about his experiences of remote viewing Jupiter, but his later experiences of what transpired as a result of that. Because someone else picked up on his abilities. But anyway, that's Jupiter, the largest planet in the solar system, and he went there in his remote viewing. Now, according to Swan, his ability to see Jupiter took only about 3.5 minutes, and in their session he made several reports on the physical features of Jupiter, such as its surface, atmosphere and weather. Swan's statement that Jupiter had planetary rings, rather like Saturn, was controversial at the time. Yet the Voyager probes, which were actually on their way to Jupiter around that time, as Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, they swung by Jupiter, and it's only when they swung by Jupiter some 18 months later did they discover that Jupiter had a planetary ring system. You can't see it from Earth, but it can be picked up by things that are closer to it, i.e. the probe. So he said it's very high in the atmosphere, there are crystals and they glitter. He says maybe the stripes are like bands of crystals, maybe like the rings of Saturn. This is how he's describing it. Though not far out like that, like in Saturn. The rings he was describing are actually closer around the planet Jupiter. And he says very close within the atmosphere. He says unintelligible sentence. I bet you'll reflect radio probes, etc. So he was talking about the radio waves of presumably Voyager and stuff like that, transmissions. So that's Voyager 2, and so that arrived later on, and that confirmed, I believe, the planetary system rings around Jupiter. So what happened with him, once he could remote view planets, someone picked up on it and they recruited him. There was a mysterious Mr. Axelrod, basically, to cut a long story short. Mr. Axelrod never quite gave his full name, and he recruited Ingo Swann on a secret cloak and dagger kind of conditions, being taken to a secret location blindfolded, and was basically paid a large sum of money for about a week's work to say remote view the moon for me. And he says, why? He says, I just want you to do it. Here's some locations on the moon I want you to go to. I want you to see if you tell me what you find there. So he basically tuned in using his remote viewing capabilities, and on the first thing he said, I can see people on the moon. And Mr. Axelrod didn't sound surprised. He says, carry on. He says, what are they doing? He said, well, they seem to appear to be digging or mining or something. He says, but they're naked. They're not humans, but they're humanoid. He said that they can see me though. So Mr. Axelrod says, well, if they can see you, get out of there now. So he got out of there and he came back. Now, whether he was going out of his body or something, I don't quite know, but basically he reported back that these things on the moon that were mining it could see him, even though he was physically on Earth. Somehow part of his consciousness could be picked up by these beings on the moon, as he was claiming they were. And now, what Ingo Swann reflected upon many years later, he actually wondered if this mysterious Mr. Axelrod was perhaps not of earthly origin himself, and perhaps he was involved with this operation on the moon, and wanted to see how far the humans, i.e. remote viewers, could actually penetrate into what they were up to. So he was recruiting him and says, he basically wanted to test the moon's defences, if you like. How far can he see into what they're doing? And so the fact is that he claimed that he could reach the moon and see what they're up to. He suggested that Axelrod was somehow in on the whole thing. So whether, do we believe him? I don't know. He can't provide proof, but it was a very mysterious thing that was going on there. So that's one claim that some guy is saying that's definitely something happened on the moon. Another claim was a guy called George Leonard, who wrote this book, Somebody Else is on the Moon. You can actually download it off the internet in PDF form. Basically, he claims that he went to NASA with another guy and says, we want to look at all your moon photos. And they spent about 3 days, 4 days going through all these moon photos. They weren't allowed to take photographs. They were allowed, I think, a pencil to make notes and quick sketches. So most of this book is made up of sketches, because when they claim there's something on the moon, like a base or a tube or a pipe, you look at the photo, you can't really see it. So he has to draw out the equivalent picture for you to try and see something. So I haven't put any pictures here from that there, because you'd have trouble trying to view it anyway. But if anybody else wants to dig into that, you can find PDF copies on the internet to download. But it involves a lot of scrolling through. But they claim that there's something like machinery, that kind of thing going on the moon. Now, there is an Alien on the Moon's documentary, so I've taken a few snippets from it. This is just a few bits and pieces. Now remember back to our telescope chap earlier on. I want you to look at this closely.
I saw this illumination that was moving with respect to the stars. smart enough to not say, Houston, there's a light out there that's following us. So technically it becomes an unidentified flying object.
While Neil and Buzz were on the lunar surface, Neil switched to the medical channel and spoke directly with the chief medical officer, saying, they're here, they're parked on the side of the crater, they're watching us.
I spotted a lot of stuff that seemed to not belong on the moon.
And it has very distinct features of a satellite dish. It's got the dish itself, the crater shape. It's got a long spike that appears to come out in the middle. All sorts of stuff that looks exactly like a satellite dish on Earth.
Tonight, we'll examine all the evidence. We'll attempt to determine if such an alien menace exists.
I thought that looked like the guy we saw earlier, the shapes of that thing. Now this is interesting.
Could this really be a female alien recovered during...
They have some strange claims up there of extra missions that have gone to the moon, secret missions, and they found crashed spaceships, supposedly.
The truth exposed.
Rolling rocks. I think there's another bit.
Just seen, there is growing evidence of an alien presence in our skies, in the solar system, and most shockingly, on the surface of the moon. Investigators point to this NASA photo taken by the Apollo 16 astronauts and can identify what appears to be a huge fortress consisting of a towering cylindrical structure positioned next to what might be a gun turret extending out for more than a mile in the Mare Crisium region. Is this proof from NASA's own archive of an alien base existing on the side of the moon that always faces Earth? And might this base even include a massive satellite dish? Experts see the dish and its location as a cause for alarm.
If we, the general public, can see this imagery on the surface of the moon, then it's clear that military and government agencies can as well. They might well be sort of quaking in their boots, wondering who's built these structures, where are they from, what do they want?
Right, I'll just get to the next bit. So that's a program there called Aliens on the Moon, or Alien Bases on the Moon. You can find it on YouTube or some of these other things like that if you want to look into it. I'm in two minds about the whole thing, you know, because they're talking about the whole Apollo thing, saying, well, this is what the Apollo astronauts have seen on the moon. So again, could this be CIA or something to suggest that, yes, we really did go to the moon, that far, and they're backing it up with this kind of information to suggest that we've gone to the moon because they saw alien bases, they saw UFOs and things like that. I don't know. It's an interesting thing now. Now this is a guy that claims he's filmed through his telescope a fleet of alien UFOs leaving the moon. But I'm going to analyse that and break it down for you and sort of suggest what I think it is. So have a look, see what you think. Let's play. There we go. So he's got his telescope, which is also attached to a video camera, and he's zooming in on the moon. And he's focusing it, so you think, yeah. Now, bit of wobble there, because he's obviously trying to set the telescope up. There he is. He's just tightening up the screws and things on the telescope to try and get it steady. He's going to zoom right back in on it now, as he frames it up and focuses the camera and the telescope. Now the moon, see, look at that, all those things there, right? Wow, is that real? We'll see him again in close up in a second. Digital zoom for analysis to help us. There they go. Is that real? Anybody convinced?
No.
No. Okay. I'll tell you why I think it's fake, right? First of all, the moon is moving down in the shot, which is the Earth moving, okay? And if you look through the telescope of the moon is always generally moving because the Earth is rotating, okay? So the moon's moving across our sky. Those fleet of UFOs are not moving with the moon as it's moving through our shot. The moon stays there, and the moon moves, and then the UFOs move off with it. But also, if they're coming off the surface of the moon from a base or whatever, they're all coming from different areas. Now the moon is roughly the size of Australia, so if that section is one part of the moon, they're all coming off from great distances apart from each other. They're not actually coming from one section altogether. They're all coming from different areas, which, 2,000 or 3,000 miles apart if you're actually on the moon. But they're also still the same size. If they come up from the surface of the moon, I would expect to see them being very, very small and slowly get larger. I mean, also the other thing is it just so happens that as the guy focuses his telescope in on the moon, that suddenly, hey presto, he's caught a load of flying saucers or whatever, leaving the moon just as he happens to have filmed it, you see. So what he's done is, I believe, he's taken real footage of the moon and just decided to play around with it in some sort of program. So again, don't believe everything you see on the internet. Yeah. Now these possible alien bases, I'm not saying they are, possible alien bases, supposedly taken by Apollo 11, if we went there. Just this little tiny thing here, so we're going to have a closer look at that. There we go. So there, you've got this image there, markings.
Crop circle.
It could be indeed. It looks like ancient Aztecs or whatever's going on there. Now that could have been overlaid in Photoshop. I can't say for sure. Someone again could have taken an image of the moon, and it's so easy these days just to cut and paste and plonk something over there. Okay. This is what we saw in the Aliens on the Moon documentary. This dish. It looks like it's almost made of stone or something like that. Again, if it's there. Was it real, or is it something they've placed there? It might be hints of some alien artifacts or something that's there. I'm not going to commit myself to saying 100% that there's aliens on the moon, but I just think it's interesting stuff to see there. Now this guy is an interesting guy. He is Paul Davis. He's a physicist and scientist. He's written a lot of books. He's also interviewed a lot by the media, opinions on space and stuff like that. And he talks about the SETI program. But he also was talking about that we should suggest focusing on the moon. Look at the moon. Look at the images of the moon for evidence of aliens and artifacts like that. He says, from these numbers, if you can get enough people, it's obvious that a manual search by a small team is hopeless, which is why they suggest calling on amateur enthusiasts to assist with the processing and the scanning of the lunar reconnaissance orbiter images for potential alien artifacts. That's a mainstream guy saying that. That's interesting. Why would he say that, I wonder? There's also been claims, get it, that NASA, airbrush, which is the terminology, is the old-fashioned terminology. You can do it digitally these days. You airbrush things out the pictures of the moon that they don't want you to see. So here you have an area of the moon with craters and mountains and things like that. You've got this very blurry object there that they claim is something that they don't want you to see what it is, so they've airbrushed over it. But someone points out this could be something like a huge pipe exiting a blurred object or going into the ground. I mean, whatever they're describing, it may be incorrect, but they can spot things here, and so they believe that there's things that are airbrushed out of the shot there. This is an interesting one. Is this a natural structure, or is it a digital watch? Planted in the alien soil? I don't know, but this is a strange thing that's supposedly been taken on the moon. I mean, it could be morphed there with Photoshop, I don't know, but interesting thing there. It seems to camouflage itself to a certain extent by being the same colour as the moon. Now, evidence of mining, so they say. These are craters that they think they've been dug through. Excavated crater in the larger crater of Flamsteed P. So they seem to think they've cut things into these craters and taken the lunar soil apparently you can, there's enough energy in this lunar soil that you can do stuff with it. So that might be a reason for anyone to want to mine it in some way. And this is a diagram, Spherian crater that could be excavated. So they reckon that this has been excavated in different layers here, and they've marked out these certain areas where they think there's been activity. Okay. This maybe shows it as a diagram where they're saying that, you know, soil has been pushed up against one thing and then pushed up against there, so that the whole thing has been manufactured. It's not a natural formation of how that crater's been formed. They've been digging it out. Now, we met our friend Crow777 earlier. He also claims to have filmed what they call lunar waves going across the moon. Other people claim to have done this as well. So I'm going to press play and hopefully we can get something here. There he goes, Crow77. I won't play the whole video. I'll play a little bit, give you an idea of what's going on.
For those of you that follow me all the time, you will have seen...
See this shimmering that goes over the moon, you'll see it, maybe in other shots.
I've heard the things I'm going to say.
He said that this is other people, okay, film the same thing. This little pattern going across there?
The record is claiming discovery rights as of September 26th, and I think it's midnight in 2012, the first time that I shot the lunar wave just after the fall equinox. So, to get into what we know about the waves, most of the wave filmings have been near equinoxes, very near equinoxes. Even this last filming from Berlin, Germany, you know, in March we're going to have an equinox here. This one is maybe the furthest away, but I believe we had one that was just after the summer solstice in June. I think it was less than 30 days away from the summer solstice, but most of them have been filmed at equinoxes. So from the moment that I filmed and actually understood what the 2012 filming of the lunar wave meant, and it took me a while to understand, because when I first shot it, I too was thinking equipment failure and all kinds of things. But when I had the epiphany and understood what the footage meant,
is it heat from the Earth? Is it a problem with the computer, or is it
people that have shot this 10 times?
Aspects of the telescope? We don't understand. There's another one.
Footage shot by 6 independent systems, 2 from Germany, all the rest shot in the United States. We know for a fact that 2 of the clips that I shot prove that the wave does not cross the video frame, that it stops at the edge of the moon. In those 2 clips, there's enough ambient light, and in the September filming, we're in the summertime, we shot at 8:30.
So, he says that there's these waves that go around the moon, equinoxes and things like that, and other people on YouTube have submitted their videos to him. I also saw a guy that says it's a load of rubbish, and says that it can easily be created in any kind of editing program that you'd use for putting programs together. And he showed how, so I thought I'll try and emulate it and see it. So this is my version of the lunar wave. Not as good, because it was my first attempt, and I took someone's lunar footage and just messed around with it. So let's see if we can get this to play. Here we go. Now, I didn't add the music, this is all theirs. This is someone that's filmed the moon through their telescope, and it's moving across the sky. You've got the slight wobble as the telescope's maybe trying to capture it. And you'll see my lunar wave. Okay, and I created this in a program called Adobe Premiere, which is an editing program. Here's my lunar wave. Not as effective as the others, but you know, it's my first attempt. See, now I've created that artificially. You know, it's a false one, and I've taken the clip and duplicated it, and then just put it slightly behind the other, and then masked it through. So there's something. Now I could speed that up and make it more effective, and maybe over a period of time I can make that really effective and convince people. So what I'm saying is, you've got to be careful. Don't believe everything you see about these sorts of things. Okay. Let's see if we can get to the next one. Right. Here's some photographs of what they claim to be a jet of something coming out of King's Crater taken by Apollo 16, and you've got this thing, which is a crater here, and there's a jet of something being blasted out there, like soil or something. And they've got another photo here. I don't know why they've got two photos, but they reckon there's a difference. But maybe there's a slight difference in the mist, but it's coming out more there. It's not that clear, but I suppose if it's a craft going over the moon, they accidentally caught it in shot. They've got two pictures there to try and show the difference, but I can't really see much difference myself, to be honest. So yeah, there's been recordings of things that have been ejected out of craters and things. There's craft being flying around the moon. Now, we've seen these large moon models before. I mentioned it before. You know, did we go or not? I don't know. 100%. I've got my suspicions that maybe it's not all as cooked up to be. But you can see an example there of men making a model of the moon. This might be prior to the actual Apollo program, because I know that they did exhibitions about the moon. Here's another chap making a large model of the moon. This was done for 1939. Now, it's obviously not for the Apollo program, but it shows that they can do absolute brilliant reconstructions of the moon. Obviously, you've got the lines of the panel there where they've actually nailed this down, so it's maybe not as effective as later models, but it's an example of what they can do. And this is obviously without lunar reconnaissance orbiters and things like that. They were literally taking this from, you know, looking through telescopal photographs at the time. Now, this is an interesting guy. We talked about people's statements earlier of people that supposedly have gone to the moon in their mind of, name already now, Ingo Swann. This was from Sergeant Carl Wolf, who was researching moon photographs, not for NASA, he didn't work for NASA, but he worked for part of the American government. And he was a sergeant in the 1960s, and he was called to go and repair a machine, photographic machine, that was looking at lunar photographs. And this is his statement he made
My name is
press
Carl
conference.
And I was a precision electronics photographic repairman with a top secret crypto clearance in the United States Air Force. I was stationed at Langley Air Force Base in Virginia. In 1965, in mid-1965, I was loaned to the Lunar Orbiter Project at NASA on Langley Field. Dr. Colley was in charge of that project. They had problems with a piece of electronic equipment that was bottlenecking their production of photographs. I went to the facility, and when I walked into the facility, there were scientists from all over the world. I was stunned actually to see people at a NASA project from all over the world. It didn't make any sense to me initially. I was taken into the laboratory where the equipment was malfunctioning. I couldn't repair it in the dark. I asked to have it removed. Airman second class was in the dark room at that time. I was also in Airman second class. I was interested in how the whole process functioned, how the data got from the lunar orbiter to the laboratory. I asked the young man if he described the process to me. He did. About 30 minutes into the process, he said to me, in a very distressed way, by the way, we've discovered a base on the backside of the moon. And then he proceeded to put photographs down in front of me, and clearly in these photographs were structures, mushroom-shaped buildings, spherical buildings, and towers. And at that point I was very concerned because I knew we were working on compartmentalized security. He had breached security, and I was actually frightened at that moment. And I did not question him any further. And a few moments later, someone did come into the room. I worked there for 3 more days, and I remember going home and naively thinking, I can't wait to hear about this on the evening news. And here it is, more than 30 years later, and I hope we hear about it tonight. And I will testify under oath before Congress.
There you go, so that's 10 minutes. Okay. That's Carl Wolf talking about what he discovered in the 60s by talking to people that were photographing the moon with a lunar reconnaissance orbiter or devices similar to that. And he, 30 years later, came out at the Stephen Greer Disclosure Project and said what he saw. So possible that there is something happening there. I'll get past that. So yeah, he's a whistleblower. Now, people said that he was actually he should be prosecuted for saying things like that because he's obviously breaking the rules. So NASA should, you know, this lady who's written this is Gabriel Picard, and you know, surely if someone at NASA had been seriously breaching national security, they would have been prosecuted. But I mean, why would NASA prosecute these people openly? Then it's admitting that there is a base on the moon, so it doesn't want to prosecute because it draws a whole lot of attention to it, basically. So Ken Johnson is another guy that he wasn't actually a NASA worker, but he was a manager of part of their projects, and he claims he also witnessed moon photos showing artificial structures and was asked to destroy the photos. The story goes he was refused and fired by NASA. So I'll just play a little bit of this quickly. If I can just get this up and running.
Okay. Yeah, now this is another one of your pictures that I'm putting on the screen here, and it says that these are, I guess, advanced technology ruins. And you can take a look at, I guess they're trying to look closely at them.
Okay.
Certainly look like about some writing.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay, I haven't seen this or looked at it, and we get a lot of anomalies sent in. You can look in the middle of the top one and you can see a perfectly square-looking slab. And, it is not something normally you find in geology with perfect 90-degree angles and turns and stuff. And I'm not sure exactly what this person was trying to say.
I'll get to that.
Well, this is actually one of yours. This is one of the...
That's someone sent, he's been asked to comment on it. I'll get to another one. This is supposedly, you know, we talk about UFOs parked on the side of craters. Where this photo comes from, I can't 100% say, but supposedly Apollo 15, a UFO parked on the side of a crater. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's part of the thing to give us the impression that there's things happening out there. Now this is a website that shows lots of anomalies. You can see the one here, which is an interesting one. You think, my goodness, that's definitely archaeological, something on the moon going on there. But after a little bit of research, I found, there's a close-up of it. It looks very, very interesting. So you think, wow, that's absolute proof. But is it? Because, let's show you this clip here. No, hang on. Sorry, I've got to go back. Try and get it to play. I'm going to go past this. Basically, it says Werner von Braun, Man on the Moon clips. There's a video on YouTube made in about 1958, I think, with the help of Disney, with Werner von Braun, who was behind the Apollo program, designing the rockets and things like that. And he was describing about how they potentially could do it with space rockets and things like that. And they did a potential special effects extravaganza of how it might look. And they showed this rocket going past the moon, and they got the guys looking down there saying when they're picking up high levels of radiation from this part of the moon, and in the film they're firing flares down at the moon, and these flares illuminate the dark side of the moon, and hey presto, there's that image that you just saw there. So it was actually a completely false image. It doesn't really exist on the moon, it's something that was created for this Disney film. But a lot of people have been taking that clip and putting it out as evidence of the moon base. So this is why you've got to be careful with these things. This is an interesting thing. This is Encounter with Type. This was a book written by Buzz Aldrin about, it's a story about possibly encounters of strange things on the moon. Why is Buzz Aldrin writing about things like that, about aliens on the moon? You'd think he'd want to steer clear of that, wouldn't you? But no, he's actually written about strange things happening on the moon and Mars and things like that. Now this is possibly an alien base by the Chang orbiter, captured in February 2012, I believe. But someone else has pointed out it's actually not that at all. It's something completely fake. So again, you've got to be wary of these things. Don't just see something as an object and say, yeah, that's definitely on the moon, it's an alien thing. Someone's pointed out it's definitely a fake, so I've got reservations about that one as well. However, there's other people that said that there's towers on the moon, which is interesting. This is a tower on the moon. I'll see if we can get a closer up of it. Probably about 2 or 3 miles high. Photographed possibly on Apollo missions. They call it the Shard. 7 miles high, in fact, it says there. And this is supposedly a taken by Hasselblad photo by an Apollo astronaut. It's called The Castle, which was photographed on the bottom part of the moon. You can't really see the background there, but what is it? Right, okay. So, is there an alien base on the moon? Well, the evidence, it's a bit iffy. If they are there, my reasoning would be that they're perhaps there either to observe us, but also they could be there for other reasons. They could be mining the moon as well. If you think of aliens, say for instance, if you've got a nation like the United States, it would have bases in other parts of the world where it could take resources or keep an eye on people or have its presence there in other parts of the world. Aliens, if they're there, might want to kind of observe us or keep an eye on us by having their own observation things on the moon itself. And so it's a possibility. I'm not ruling it out, but I can't prove it. I think I'll leave it there. I've got loads more to get through, but I know that it'll run on and on and on. So I think I've said enough. But anyway, I'll say thank you very much for your time. It's been a long afternoon, but thanks very much indeed. Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. We're just going to take a very short break, maybe 5 minutes maximum. Okay, and then there'll be the question and answer session. So if you're going to go somewhere, don't go too far. All right. No problem. No problem.